Finale day. Who is ready for the ending? Oh my gosh, this is going to be so much fun. For those of you who have not read ahead and do not know what is in store for today, I cannot wait to see the comments. But we have a ton to read today, like the longest reading I think I've ever done. So we're going to get started pretty early. I will give people a little bit of time to come in because I know notifications can sometimes not go as fast, but hopefully we won't go over the time, but just be prepared that it might, because this is going to be crazy. I also am going to be giving away 2 copies of Beautiful Demons signed today. I'm going to give one away on the live at the very end, and then I'm going to give one away on the replay. So if you're here watching this on the replay, I will choose a winner on Friday before I go live for coffee chat. All you have to do is hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and leave a comment. So even if you're here on the live, you can wait until it turns into a replay and leave a comment on the replay, and that will give you a second entry to win. So I'm going to give away 2 copies and hopefully send them out straight away, because otherwise they're going to go into storage. So it's going to be great. I am so excited. I saw Alexandra said she's going to stay up all the way from Germany to watch this ending, even though she might oversleep tomorrow. So I appreciate the dedication. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited for this. I will talk a little bit more about how this all came to be in terms of this twist and whether I saw it coming and how, when I decided that this would be the way it is, and so forth and so on at the end. I also had somebody message me about the journaling that we had on Friday or on Monday, the journal that Harper reads versus what happens in Vengeful Darkness. And I wish that I could talk about that because it's important, but I can't because it would be some spoilers. So I was trying to think what's the best way to address it in terms of what happens in Vengeful Darkness. The only thing I will say is that you do find out some things here from this journal, which we don't know at this point who wrote this journal or where it came from, but we find out some things from this journal. But you have to remember that the person speaking in this journal is writing things in real time, whereas some of the facts you find out about the Order of Shadows later are someone looking back in hindsight with the help of someone who is giving them information. So I can't give any more than that. It's not inconsistency. It is just the fact that when time, after hundreds of years have passed, you get to see more about what happens in the future. Yeah, I could reveal more on Discord, but even on Discord, oh yay, it was Savannah. Hopefully I explained it well to you in terms of what was going on with that, because there will be some stuff that will come up in the final book that will kind of explain a little bit more about that. But there is, it's all like, it's all together. So, oh yay, joining Publish and Thrive. I'm so excited. It's going to be awesome. I'm adding maybe like a total of 6 or 7 new videos this time around, and I've got to get them all finished. So if you're an alumni looking through, you probably have already seen that there are several videos that say coming soon. Those are in process of being recorded and outlined and everything. They're outlined, but they're in the process of being recorded and edited, and they probably won't go up until the week before the new part goes live. But either way, it's going to be even better this time than ever. So it's going to be really good. So even if you're an alumni not going back through the whole course, you might want to stop and look for the things that are coming in that are new. Mostly a lot of mindset stuff, but there's also going to be a section on things like Kindle Vella and Patreon and all the different ways that you can publish outside of just publishing to Amazon, because I think that kind of stuff is getting more and more important. It's not going in this time, but when I re-record the course for February, there's going to be a special section on social media as well that will talk about YouTube channels or, all those different things. So there's lots of cool stuff happening for sure. Okay. I need my own convention. That is definitely, I will tell you guys about this more on Friday if you would like to know, but thank you so much for saying that. I definitely would like to have something like that. And that's something that George has been telling me for a long time. And George always knows. And then he always kind of convinces me later I have to come around to whether things are right or not. But I do feel that that is something I would really, really love to do, because I feel like there are a lot of conventions out there that focus on sales, 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 but I think it would be awesome to have a convention that focused on writing and inspiration and motivation and the mindset side of writing your books. So that'll be good. Carolina says, loved this book reading, but I need to start from the beginning. It's hard to stop listening and go back. I totally understand. Renee, don't tell George he's all knowing. Then he's just going to get a big head about it. What he always says is, I told you that 10 years ago. How come you never listened to me? But, it just takes me time to come around. The Sarah Cannon World Tour. There'll be like 3 people in the audience everywhere I go. It'll be awesome. I did have a Kindle daily deal yesterday in India. So that was pretty neat to be a Kindle daily deal over there. So if anybody here is from India and picked up my book, let me know. I'm hearing good things. Oh, George, I love you. All right, we have to get straight into this because we have a lot of reading to do today. So definitely get yourself comfortable, get settled in, because this is some big stuff happening today, and I cannot wait to introduce it. Super short recap is just that Harper and Jackson had to leave the underground. They have a book that they have been looking in and reading. It's some kind of journal that Andros had gotten a hold of, and they were reading through and found actual initiation spell that spells out all the items they would need to free Airden and potentially free lots of people from the Order of Shadows. But the one item that they're not sure about is this ring. There's supposed to be a ring, and it's supposed to be anchoring the extra like all the hundreds of gates that are open. So they believe that it's there in the shadow world. And so they've been kind of looking through it. They went to a hut or a village of a guy who was able to tell them that most of the sapphire, like gemstone deposits, are in the Southern Kingdom. Well, they've been told they can't go to the Southern Kingdom because not only is it rival of the Northern Kingdom, but also there's supposedly like ghosts and all kinds of monsters and stuff in the borderlands and all of that. So that is kind of where they left off. And they've also gotten a chance to see just how much the Order of Shadows has ravaged this land. There's children out on their own. There's, demons who should be able to use their magic who are not using magic because they're too scared. So there's been mass destruction for the people that are just there on their own out in the villages. So we are picking up with them leaving the man's house with his daughter, and they're going out on their adventure. So I know there will be some people popping in like, oh no, did we start already? Because we're starting a little early, but we have a long reading to go today. So here we go. So this is the finale of Rival Demons. Settle in. This is chapter 56, The Glass Forest. We woke up just before dawn, left a note to say thank you, and stole out of the house before most of the residents were awake. It took us a couple of hours before we reached the edge of the borderlands. A thick forest spread out in front of us. The trees here were strange, almost as if they were made of a dark crystal. Their branches were free of leaves and twisted around in knots and points. Jackson stopped to pull his sword from his pack. What kind of monsters do you think we might face? I asked. I'm not sure, Jackson said. Ever since I was young, I've heard stories of demons who got too close to the border's edge and were never heard from again. His face drained of color. He was truly spooked by this. I suddenly felt a lot less confident about my decision to come this way. My heart pounded, but I knew we had to press on. The forest looked dark, but it was nothing like the obsidian forest we'd had to pass through on our way to the underground. I hated to think about what monsters we might find lurking in the shadows, but we had no choice but to face it. You ready? Jackson asked. I nodded. Just keep your eyes open. You'll be able to see a lot better than I will in there. We stepped into the shadows under the canopy of trees, taking our steps slowly and deliberately. Every muscle in my body tensed, ready to fight if something pounced on us from the darkness. Every strange noise or whisper of movement sent my heart into cardiac arrest. I could swear I heard someone walking behind us, but when I turned, there were only shadows. Above us, strange birds with long black feathers cawed and screeched. I expected one of them to descend on us and try to peck our eyes out at any moment. Something slithered on the ground in front of my feet. I let out a terrified scream that echoed off the glass-like trees, but when Jackson came running, he reassured me that the snake wasn't poisonous in any way. "This place has me totally creeped out," I said. "Let's just keep moving," he said. "Stay close." We walked, taking each step with care. Our senses were on high alert, our legs ready to run if we came upon trouble. And when we emerged from the glass forest hours later, I nearly fell to the ground with relief. Somehow, we'd safely made it to the other side. Chapter 57, The Scariest Thing Out Here. The forest lay at our backs, and grassy swampland stretched out before us. In the far distance, the sun reflected off a wall of silver metal that marked the official entrance to the Southern Kingdom. "Be careful where you step," Jackson said. "Try to stay on the solid patches." I let him lead the way through the maze of swamp. I tried my best to keep to the grass, but the pathways were extremely narrow and squishy. I felt like a tightrope walker. A noise off to the right surprised me, causing me to lose my balance. I tried to reach out for Jackson's arm, but he was too far ahead. I lost my footing and fell into the dark green water of the swamp. Immediately, I felt some kind of strong undercurrent pulling me under. I sank like a stone, flailing around to find something, anything I could hold on to. Jackson's hand found mine, and he lifted me with ease, depositing me on a narrow strip of grassy land. "Are you all right?" I breathed in and out, trying to slow my racing heartbeat. "I'm fine," I said, but something under there was pulling me down. So far, we hadn't seen any real monsters, but now more than ever, I was wound as tight as a spring. I walked more slowly through the swamp, holding on to Jackson's hand and never taking my eyes off my feet. A splash behind us nearly sent me off balance again, but Jackson reached out to steady me just in time. "What was that?" he asked. "I don't know," I said, "but I've had this feeling all day that we're being followed." "What? Why didn't you say something?" he asked. I shrugged. "I don't know. I thought I was just being overly dramatic." In the water, just a few feet away, something pushed itself frantically toward the surface, yelling out in fear. Jackson left me where I stood and ran to see what had fallen into the swamp water. "Oh my God," he said. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he crouched down and reached deep into the water, pulling something out with all of his strength. I carefully made my way toward him, fear gripping my chest. I gasped as the figure in the water came into view. The little boy from the abandoned village. Jackson set him onto the grass, and the boy scrambled close and held tightly to his legs, as if his life depended on it. And in a place like this, it just might have. When the child caught his breath and had stopped shaking, I leaned down and caught his eye. "Have you been following us all this way?" The boy lowered his head, then nodded slowly. I closed my eyes and let out a sigh of relief. "I thought you were a hunter or something," I said. The boy shook his head violently, and I laughed. "Well, I know you're not now," I said, "but you shouldn't sneak up on people like that. You scared me to death." Jackson laughed, some of the tension of the day's journey relaxing his shoulders. "I can't believe this," he said. "My whole life, people have warned me of the extreme dangers of the borderlands. And look, the scariest thing out here is a child." I smiled. He had a point. I lifted my hand to shield my eyes from the sun. I turned around and looked out over the swamp. Other than the water itself, there didn't seem to be any other dangers here. No monsters or poisonous gases, no soldiers waiting to take us to the dungeons. How had everyone in the north been so wrong about this place? It made me wonder what other lies had been told about the Southern Kingdom. Chapter 58, I Hope I Never Do. The part about the wall was true, at least, Jackson said after the three of us had safely crossed over the swamp. Of course, to hear most people tell it, this wall is guarded by 1,000 demons. What is this made out of, anyway? I asked, staring up at the bright silver metal. Remember the rare type of silver the Order used to create the ritual daggers? Jackson said. The kind that's strong enough to kill shadow demons? I asked. That's the one. That's what this is made of? I asked. Yes, he said. It's mined here in the Southern Kingdom and is one of the strongest, most indestructible types of metal there is. How do we get around it? Normally, we would just fly over the top, he said, but I really don't want to use my magic, not even for a second. I understood his fear. We had no idea just who or what might be tracking us. Hunters, witches, the king's guards. We needed to stay as under the radar as possible. Jackson pulled a drawing from his pocket. Last night, the old man drew this map for us, he said. He said he remembered his father talking about the gem dealer being located in a medium-sized city just past the eastern gate. He looked down the length of the wall and pointed to his left. If we walk a couple miles this way, we should get to the east gate pretty easily. You don't think it will be guarded? I asked. I'm not sure, he said. I guess we'll find out soon enough. The walk to the gate only took us an hour. Jackson carried the boy on his shoulders most of the way. To be careful, we stayed back from the gate and watched for a while, making sure there were no patrolling guards or anyone there to keep northerners out. After another hour, with no activity in sight, we decided to risk it and walk straight through the gate. Excitement created butterflies in my stomach. We were so close now to another clue. If we could somehow locate the gem dealer, he would surely know where to find the concentration of blue stones. But when we passed through the gate, my eyes widened as I looked out at the ruins of what once must have been a flourishing city. I stood speechless. There was so little that was really known about the Southern Kingdom, but from the looks of it, they were having just as rough a time with the Order here as the North. We wandered through the debris, stepping over burned wood, crushed stone walls, toys, and ruined furniture. Unlike the small villages we'd passed on the road, this had been a real city. From the sheer size of the destroyed area, I would have guessed at least 10,000 demons must have lived here at one point. This can't be it, I said. Can I see the map? Jackson handed me the paper, but I immediately saw that this was exactly where the old man had remembered the gem dealer to have lived. I kicked at a charred chair. This can't be it, I said again. There's no way we'll ever find the dealer now. No one could have survived this. Suddenly, I felt the events of the past few days begin to take their toll. I'd been living on adrenaline and hope, but this was a blow to everything I'd been feeling. My body was completely wrecked and exhausted. My leg was better, but the spot where the hunter had wounded me still ached. After 2 straight days of nonstop walking, it screamed in pain. Somehow, I'd forced myself not to feel it. Everything else had been going so well, I didn't want to admit the desperate situation we were really in here. I sat down on a heavy stone and put my head in my hands. Don't give up, Jackson said. Maybe there's another city just down the road or something. Or maybe if we look around, we could still find the gem shop and find a clue there. I shook my head and looked out over the ruins. How could we possibly find a gem shop in all this rubble? Besides, what would we find there? Gems? How is that going to help us? Then let's just sit here and whine about it, he said. That'll help. Angry, I stared at him through squinted eyes. Oh, excuse me for expressing some disappointment, I said. It's not like we've been through much in the past few months. Hell, all this has been such a happy, positive year for me. Jackson sighed and set the boy down on the ground. Look, I don't want to argue with you, okay? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I know, I said. I don't want to argue either. It's just like I feel we have no idea what we're really doing, you know? It feels like we're doing something that's impossible and crazy and probably really stupid. I was just starting to get my hopes up, but now this? When I saw all this, it was like the weight of the past few days just came crashing down on me. Jackson pulled me into a hug and I leaned into him. loving the feel of his chin as it rested on the top of my head. "We're going to figure this out," he said. "We just have to keep trying. As long as we never stop looking, we'll find it, okay?" I nodded. Footsteps sounded behind us, and I flipped around, my heart racing. A man stood at the edge of the rubble near the road. He froze as we turned, throwing up his hands as if surrendering. "Sorry to disturb," he said. "Just was kind of going through the ruins looking for something that used to belong to my mate." Surprisingly, he didn't seem the least bit interested in the fact that I was human. He didn't give me that fearful look so many of the demons in the north had given me. "You used to live here?" Jackson asked. "Oh, yeah," the man said, squinting and looking out over the expanse of the rubble. "It's a shame, isn't it?" "I wouldn't have thought anyone could survive destruction like this," I said. "You must feel very lucky." The man looked at me like I'd gone insane. "Well, by the time this happened, no one was living here anymore," he said. "The king's centralization project and all." I raised an eyebrow. This guy seemed to not even realize we were from the north. For someone who was walking right along the border between north and south, he didn't seem afraid or scared or even the slightest bit nervous. What was going on here? "We were looking for a man who used to live here," Jackson said, "a gemstone dealer." The man rubbed his chin and thought for a minute. "You must mean Saurian," he said. "Older demon with a passion for rocks." Jackson nodded. "He passed into the next world some time ago," the man said. "Is that what you guys are doing so far out from the center, looking for rocks?" "Yeah, something like that," I said. "What we were really hoping to find was a kind of quarry of bluestones, a place where they were sort of concentrated. Have you ever seen such a place?" The man eyed me suspiciously. "You know those gem deposits are pretty rare, right? Only one per stone," he said. "Plus, they're dangerous. Hunters like to hang out there. I don't recommend it." "We know," Jackson said. "So does that mean you know where it is? Could point us in the right direction?" The man shook his head. "I shouldn't even be out this far, but you know how mates can be. Mine is dying to get hold of her mother's favorite cooking pot. She keeps sending me out here to find it in the ruins, but I know that pot's long gone by now," he said. "There's no way I'd wander as far outside as the Bluestones." It was the first sign of fear the man had shown since we met him. "Where are you two from, anyway? One of the villages still on the outskirts or something?" I shook my head. "We're from somewhere even farther than that," I said. "But we aren't looking for any trouble. We just need to find those stones if we can. Please, if there's any information you can give us, we'd really appreciate it." The man shrugged. "It's your lives you're risking if you go out there." He looked off into the far distance, holding a hand up to his eyes to shade them from the sun's. "If you keep walking that way for about a day or two, you'll come upon the bluestone quarry you're talking about. Still, I would highly recommend against it. There are some patrols that still guard those lands, but you're much safer near the center these days. You wouldn't want to run into a hunter." "No, we wouldn't," I said. The man shuddered. "I've never actually seen one myself, and I hope I never do." He leaned over and grabbed something metal from underneath a broken wall. He held it up, shook his head, then threw it back into the pile. "Wish you two the best of luck," he said. With that, the man disappeared into a fog of pure white smoke. I stared at the white fog, confused. "Why is his power white?" I asked. Jackson shook his head and shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe it's a southern demon thing," he said. "We should get moving." I realized the boy wasn't with us, and for a moment I panicked. Then I saw him crouching low in the rubble. "What are you doing over there?" I asked. He looked up at me and smiled. He held his closed hand out to me as if he had found something for me. I opened my hand, and he placed a pure blue stone in my palm. Chapter 59. Enjoy these moments. Much of the day was already gone, but we decided to push on toward the blue stones. We didn't have a road to follow, so we just made sure to keep heading southeast. The best we could do was hope the demon in the ruined city had given us good directions. Along the way, we ran into a lot of animals, but no demons. Every village in between was completely deserted or ruined. The wildlife out here flourished. The deer-like creatures here were much smaller, with black spotted pelts and large black antlers. Wolves with pure white coats roamed around the tree line of a forest in the distance. Tiny green and white flowers grew all around us, and every once in a while, I spotted a tiny blue and red jumping things in the grass. When I originally pictured the demon world, I don't know why I'd imagined a drastically different terrain or set of living creatures. Now that I'd had some time to explore it a little more, I realized it wasn't all that different from Earth. There was a lot more nature here than I was used to, with all the trees and grass and such. And there was no need for cars or anything like that. But overall, I was comfortable here. In fact, the Southern Kingdom was growing on me. Somehow it felt like home. I think we should make camp before it gets too dark, Jackson said after we'd been walking for a couple of hours. Relief flowed through me. As much as I enjoyed the scenery, my feet were freaking killing me. I second that, I said. I could use a rest and some food. He looked around, surveying the space around us. He pointed toward the tree line. I think we should get closer to those trees over there so we're less out in the open. Let's see if we can find a good spot that's a little hidden. It didn't take long to set up our camp, since all we had were a few blankets in our packs. Jackson started a fire to keep us warm, and we snacked on mushrooms and berries we gathered from the nearby woods. The boy never said a word. He wouldn't even tell us his name, but he was sweet, and he seemed happy to have company. He fell asleep in my lap soon after dinner. Spending time with Jackson like this was amazing. It was hard to believe that we had been acting like complete strangers just a few days ago. Despite all that had happened in the past year, it never ceased to amaze me how fast things could change. I wanted to enjoy these moments together while I could. I never knew when it all might be taken away again. Do you ever think about what you'll do if we actually manage to free Airden? I asked. I figured I was opening a can of worms with this conversation, but he had promised to be more open with me, and I wanted to know. Will you come back here? Jackson propped his back against a tall, red-barked tree, and I leaned back to stare up at the 3 moons and a sky full of stars. I won't be coming back to marry Leah, if that's what you mean, he teased. I reached up to smack his arm and laughed. You better not. I honestly don't know what will happen, he said. You'll be free too, you know. You could come back here with me if you wanted. I mean, if that's what we decided to do. I liked the sound of the word we. I won't live nearly as long as you will, I said. I'll grow old and wrinkly before you even look like you've aged at all. He ran his fingers through my hair, nearly putting me to sleep with the gentle rhythm of it. We'll figure it out when the time comes, he said. I think we've got enough to think about right now without trying to decide on the rest of our lives. I nodded and closed my eyes, wondering just how long the rest of our lives might last. Chapter 60, Too Late. I tossed and turned under the stars that night. A man's face kept invading my dreams. His silver eyes looked so familiar, but I couldn't place him. Where did I know him from? I slipped in and out of my dreams, confused and anxious. When I awoke the following morning, I finally understood where I'd seen his face before. The shaman. When the underground shaman had come to heal me after my fight with the hunter, I had seen a vision of this man, his silver beard and eyes so unique and kind and strangely familiar. Jackson and I resumed our walk toward the blue stones, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I should know this man. It left me feeling a little disoriented. Is everything okay? Jackson asked after we'd walked a little ways. You've barely said 2 words today. I'm fine, I said, trying to just shake off the feeling from the dream. Have you ever met a man with silver eyes? Was there someone in Peachville like that? Jackson shook his head. Not that I've ever heard about. Why? I don't know. I hiked my backpack higher to take some of the weight off my lower back. It's nothing, just a dream I had. I never really sleep well out in the open like that, he said. Too many noises and things to wake me up throughout the night. You probably just didn't get any good sleep. I nodded. Yeah, that's all it was. The boy rode on Jackson's shoulders most of the way, smiling and taking in the scenery. The rest of the day passed without event. We got to see some beautiful countryside, but we still had yet to meet up with any of the other Southern Kingdom demons. It was weird, really. Had their population really been so drained by the Order? From the looks of it, they'd been hit really hard down here. It wasn't until about dinner time that I started to feel it. At first, it was a small buzzing feeling in my hands and feet. I thought it was probably some effect of all the walking we'd been doing. I was just tired and my body was exhausted. But after another mile, I started to feel it everywhere, like energy coursing through me with growing strength. I stopped and just let it flow through me for a second. Jackson stopped with me and raised his eyebrows. "What's going on?" he asked. "Do you need to take a break?" I shook my head and just continued to feel. I had never felt it so strongly before, but it was sort of like the way I felt every time I connected to my inner power, a warmth and a constant current, only now it was amplified. Instead of a small stream, this was beginning to feel like a full-on river. I'm feeling something. How to put words to it? Different. Different how? He asked. "Let's keep walking," I said. "I think we might be getting close." Jackson walked close by my side, watching my expression as we moved forward. "Stop staring at me," I said with a laugh. "You're making me self-conscious." He gave me that sexy half smile I'd missed so much when we were apart. "I'm just getting excited," he said. "Let me know if anything changes, okay?" Not even half a mile later, I stopped again. The humming feeling was now a strong charge throughout my body. I felt like I'd been connected to some kind of super battery. "We're so close," I said. "I can feel the power of the stones. I don't know how or why, but my body is having a very strong reaction to it. It's like a flood of power." Something in my pocket buzzed. I reached my hand in and found the small blue stone the boy had given me. "Look," I said. The stone seemed to glow from within. "Follow it," he said. "Maybe you can lead us there." I closed my eyes for a minute and allowed myself to really connect to that feeling. When I opened them, I could see very clearly where I needed to go. The force of the stones pulled me like a magnet. A hill up ahead blocked the way, but in my heart, I knew what we would find on the other side of that ridge. Too excited to walk, I threw my backpack to the ground and broke out in a run. As I crested the hill, tears sprang to my eyes, and I pressed my hands hard against my face. We'd found it. The valley below us was filled with perfect blue stones, the sun shining off of them to create an almost diamond-like effect. Jackson ran up behind me and threw his arms around me. The boy laughed and cheered, even though I knew he didn't understand our excitement. For a moment, we just stood there in awe. This is the place where all of Peachville's stones had come from. This place of power might have been where my troubled past originated, but right now, all I could see was hope for the future. Breaking loose, I ran down the hill, placing each step carefully so as not to trip. Jackson ran even faster, hitting the bottom before me. The boy sat at the top of the hill, looking down on us as he played with a small flower. Together, Jackson and I searched the large area for any sign of the ring. "It's going to be here somewhere," I said. "This is going to be it. We just have to find it." I crouched low and studied every crevice, searching for any place a ring might be hidden among the stones. I lifted loose stones from the ground and looked underneath. I studied the area from different angles, even going back up the hill to look at it from a new perspective. But the ring wasn't here. With each passing minute, I grew more and more frantic. We couldn't have come this far for nothing. Please. I had been so certain it would be here. I stood with my hands on my hips, staring out at the quarry. Wasn't there something here that looked out of place? Some rock that could be moved to reveal a secret hiding place? Something. Jackson joined me, shaking his head. "We've been looking for over an hour," he said. "What if it's not here?" His words tore through me like a hot arrow. Even though I'd been thinking it myself, I wasn't ready to hear it said out loud. I refused to accept it. "It has to be," I said, a quiver in my voice. I went back down the hill and started over, checking each section of rock again. When I got to the center of the stones, I saw something on the ground I hadn't noticed before, a very small, faceted stone. My heart jumped in my chest. All of the other stones here were raw and uncut. They had no polish or shape to them. But this stone was different. It was shaped and buffed and shined. I reached down to touch it, and suddenly a stone sculpture appeared in front of us. My eyes nearly popped out of my head. I turned to Jackson and screamed for him to come to me. He rushed my way, out of breath. "What is it? Did you find it?" "I don't know," I said, "but look, what do you think it is?" He drew his eyebrows together and looked all around. "What are you talking about?" I pointed to the square stone sculpture. "This statue thing," I said. "You're telling me you can't see it?" He shook his head. "I don't see anything." I stepped closer and put my hands on the surface of it, trying to figure out if there was a way to get inside. When my hand touched the stone, an electric shock went through my entire body. I tried to let go, but it held on to me. Then the top slowly began to open from the middle, two parts sliding out to reveal a special compartment just inside. I peered in, my heart beating so fast I could hardly breathe. On the inside of the statue was a small pedestal with a hole in the top, perfectly made to hold a ring. Only there was no ring inside. It was empty. I slumped forward, a dull pain spreading across my chest. "It's gone," I said, unable to hold my tears. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I can't see whatever it is you're seeing, Harper." I tried to breathe, but I felt like my breath was coming in through a thin straw. My head was spinning, and I knew I couldn't keep standing or I would pass out. This couldn't be happening, not now. "There's a statue here that's made to hold the ring," I said. "We were right. This is where they keep it, but it's gone. They must have gotten to it first. It's gone. It's empty." I turned around and slid down the side of the sculpture. I sat on the edge of a bright blue stone, unable to believe we'd come this far, only to have lost our chance. A dam broke inside of me. I wanted to fight. I wanted to be strong, but I also wanted to let go. I wanted all of this to be over. A year ago, I was just a girl who hated foster homes. I knew I had a different life, but I still had dreams of getting out on my own, going to college, having a life. Going to Shadowford was just a bump in the road, something I had to get through in order to come out the other side. Only it turned out to be so much more than that. I was grateful for the friends I'd made and for the relationship I now had with Jackson, but the weight of everything else I'd been through came crashing down on me. It wasn't fair that I had been thrown into this life, and as much as I wanted to be everyone's hero, I felt so weak and defeated. My tears burst forth, growing more desperate with each passing second. The exhaustion and fear and anger of the past couple of months finally broke through me like a tidal wave, refusing to be contained for another moment. Jackson put his arms around me and held me as sobs shook my body. I cried for my mother and for her horrible death. I cried for the demons who had lost their freedom. I cried for Brooke and every other girl whose life had been stolen from her before she could even question it. A cold chill ran through me as I realized that it had begun to rain. I looked up, letting the drops land on my cheeks and mix with my salty tears. Jackson stood and held his hands out to catch the rain. Then, with a worried panic on his face, he turned to me. "Harper, you have to stop crying," he said. "This isn't natural rain." I choked back a sob and shook my head. "What do you mean?" He crouched beside me and grabbed my shoulders. "It's your magic," he said. "Your emotions are so strong they're affecting the weather." I breathed in slow gasps, holding on to him so I could stand. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said. "I know it's difficult, but you have to stop crying. They'll be tracking your magic." I closed my eyes and willed my emotions to settle. Fear gripped my soul. Had I just put us in serious danger? I took a deep breath, and as I calmed down, the rain slowed to a slight drizzle. but it was too late. When I opened my eyes, I could feel their presence like a cold nothingness surrounding us. I looked toward the hill and froze. The hunters had found us. Chapter 61, To Know My Fear. I stared up at them, my flesh crawling. 3 hunters hovered at the top of the hill, and I couldn't so much as find the strength to run or move or even scream. The air around us turned icy, and the drizzling rain quickly turned to snow. Jackson took my arm. Maybe he was thinking of trying to run. I knew he could move fast, but where did we have to go? There was no safe haven to run to, no underground, not even a single city where we knew we could get help. And I knew the hunters would not stop until they had me in their clutches. White flakes stuck to my hair and face. My entire body shivered, but I felt a sudden clarity, a knowing. I planted my feet firmly on the blue stones at my feet and plugged into the buzz of power it sent through me. If we were going to have to fight them, this was the place to do it. At least here, I had an advantage. I looked toward where the boy had been sitting, but he was gone. I closed my eyes and prayed he had seen the hunters in time and had found a safe place to hide. We should never have brought him with us. What were we thinking? But the time for regrets had passed. We had to stand in this moment and face it as it was. I locked eyes with Jackson, and I knew he saw my decision in my eyes. His face had turned so white, but he nodded, accepting our fate. Okay, he said, I trust you. Those 3 words resonated through my being, filling me with a sense of love and pride and confidence. For the first time since we'd met, he truly believed in me. He stopped trying to protect me like I was a little child and was letting me be my own person, a fighter. I lifted my chin and waited. Taking their sweet time, the 3 hunters floated down toward us, circling us. Their collective stench overwhelmed my nostrils. 2 of the witches looked very familiar to the one I'd faced in the underground, but the 3rd hunter was different. She was older, her decay more complete and gruesome. She was obviously the leader of the group, her purplish black eyes never leaving my face. I stood tense and ready, waiting for them to make their move. The lead hunter finally slowed and settled in a spot just in front of me. Isn't this a pretty twist of fate? She croaked. Her voice grated on my nerves, so dry it sounded like she hadn't had a drop of moisture in years. Our hunting expedition had nothing to do with a lost Prima, but won't the priestess be pleased? She moved closer to me and reached out a gnarled finger. Her blackened fingernail ran down the edge of my cheek, but I stood my ground and not even flinching, not wanting her to know my fear. Such a beauty, she said. Too bad you couldn't see the right path. It's always a shame to lose one like you. I won't come with you, I said. You'll have to kill me. The hunter clucked her tongue and shook her head. No, you know we have to bring you alive, she said, but you'll be dead soon enough, right, sisters? The other 2 hunters laughed. The sound made my stomach lurch. Of course, your boyfriend can die here now, she said, circling Jackson like a buzzard. Don't touch him, I said, grinding my teeth together. Or what? She said with a cackle. You'll send me to my bed without any supper? I didn't answer her. She was just like the other one, toying with me. The life of a hunter must be pretty boring for them to like to play with their catch. I didn't have the patience for this. The ancient hunter moved to grab my arm, but I stepped back, avoiding her. Anger flashed across her rotten face. The more you resist us, the more you will suffer, she said. A flutter of anticipation moved through my veins. Before I had time to doubt myself, I reached inside and grabbed hold of my power. With one swift movement, I lifted my palms in front of my chest and pushed back. The 3 hunters went flying backward in separate directions, screams echoing against the blue stones. Jackson jumped to action, shifting into his demon form and flashing to the side of the younger hunter on the right. But she had time to recover from her shock. Before she had time to recover from her shock, Jackson had woven a cage of ice around her entire body, locking her in. Making the most of the dwindled numbers, I turned my attention to the other weaker hunter. I pushed the force of my power down toward the ground, breaking up the stones into large boulders. Without hesitation, I lifted several stones into the air and sent them hurtling toward the hunter's body. She easily dodged two of them, but one of the smaller stones hit her squarely in the neck, the jagged edge slicing her open. With a screech, she fell to the ground, greenish black liquid flowing through her fingertips as she lifted both hands, desperate to close the wound. With the other two temporarily disabled, we turned our attention to the ancient hunter. Rage in her eyes, she flew toward me, claws out. I tried to throw up a shield, but she moved too fast. Her nails sliced into my arm with searing pain. She opened her mouth and breathed on my wound, a poisonous cloud seeping into my open cuts. I screamed and fell back against the stone sculpture. The scratches burned so badly the pain seemed to seep into my brain. Jackson formed a small ball of ice between his hands and threw it at the ancient hunter, sending her flying off to the side. He moved to try to heal my wound, but I pushed him away. We didn't have time to nurse injuries right now. I forced the pain from my mind and took stock of the situation. The witch in the ice was thawing herself with fire, but she was obviously not very good at it. Fire must not have been her strongest energy. The hunter I'd hurt with the stone was on her feet again, her wound still leaking. The ancient hunter had disappeared behind the hill for now, but her absence made me nervous. What was she doing up there? "Behind you," I said to Jackson. He turned just in time to see one of the younger hunters descending on him with a net in her hands. She barely missed him, which threw her slightly off balance. Jackson took advantage of the moment and created a large block of ice that he used to bash the thing's head. She fell to her knees, disoriented. I summoned a pile of blue stones and quickly moved them toward her with great force, burying her beneath them. Working perfectly with my plan, Jackson encased the blue stones in a layer of ice, freezing the hunter inside. An enormous sense of pride swelled through me. We were winning against the most fearsome creatures the Order could send after us. We were outnumbered, yet still alive. But my celebration was premature. Without warning, the ancient hunter flew out from her hiding place behind the hill, some kind of dome-like glass structure in her hands. I rolled out of the way, but Jackson hadn't seen her fast enough. She brought the glass dome down on top of him, sealing him inside. He pounded against it, yelling something, but I couldn't hear him. I scrambled backwards, stunned at how fast the tables had turned. I watched as he tried several attempts to break the glass, but nothing would shatter it. He was trapped and helpless. I quickly lifted the largest rock I could find and sent it flying toward the glass, figuring he might get a little cut, but at least he would be free. But the rock merely bounced off the structure, leaving it completely unharmed. My heart sank and panic rose in my throat. I was on my own. Chapter 62, This Unknown Power. I needed a new word for fear. My body tensed and my vision blurred. I stumbled backwards, searching my mind for anything that could get me out of this moment. There was no escaping us. Above us, dark clouds gathered. Thunder rumbled, echoing the fear in my heart. The hunter Jackson first encased in ice was free now. She flew to her older sister's side, hatred rolling off her like a haze. "There's no fighting us," the ancient one said. She wiped greenish fluid from her forehead from where Jackson's orb of ice had sliced her. "You may be stronger than we expected, but you will never have the strength to beat us." My eyes flicked to where Jackson stood, still pounding on the dome. His eyes were dark with panic. Terror ran through me like lava, leaving a hot flush on my cheeks. I straightened up and lifted my palms, summoning a strong flame. The ancient witch narrowed her eyes at me. You will regret this, girl. I told you I would not go with you, I said through gritted teeth. You can break me down all you want, but I'll never go willingly. The witches moved toward me. Not knowing what else to do, I created a circle of fire around myself, trying to block them from reaching me. A tidal wave of icy cold water descended on me, dousing the entire fire and leaving me shivering and wet. I drew in a freezing breath, shocked and so incredibly cold. I'm tired of playing with you, the ancient hunter said. This ends here. She raised her gnarled hands and lifted me into the air. She threw me as hard as she could. I lost all control of my body, flying through the air over the top of the hill on the opposite side. I lost sight of Jackson and the bluestones. The ground rushed toward me with unthinkable speed, a field of pure white. I braced myself for the impact. Pain shot through me as I hit the ground. Something sharp stabbed through my skin in the back, just below my shoulder. The blood that poured from me was warm and sticky against my cold skin. My breath was knocked from my body, and I gasped desperately for air. My head hit the ground hard, and my ears throbbed. I turned my head, trying to see if the hunters were coming after me. Time moved in painful, slow ticks. Out of the corner of my eye, all I could see was white. My heart stopped beating as the scene became clear. A light snow fell from the sky above me, falling onto my face and melting into tears that slid down my cheeks. I knew that if I could see myself, I would be the perfect replica of the scene from Jackson's nightmares. Horror seized me, and I drew in a sharp, painful breath. This was it. This was the moment. I closed my eyes as the blood slowly left my body. A shadow fell over me. I blinked and saw that both hunters were hovering over my body, smiles twisting their horrid faces. How had it come to this? How could I let my life end like this? My head fell to the side, not wanting their ruined bodies to be the last thing I saw in this world. I braced myself for the cold snow against my cheek, but instead of cold, something soft and silky caressed my skin. I blinked, not sure whether to believe what I was seeing. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the soft white petals of a rose, my mother's favorites. I plucked a petal from the rose and held it tight in my hand. Jackson had drawn it wrong. It wasn't snow that cradled my wounded body. It was a bed of white roses, hundreds of them all around me, telling me not to quit, not to give up until the last breath had been ripped from my body. In the distance, I saw the small boy. He emerged from his rocky hiding place, staring at me with tears in his eyes. I had a feeling he'd seen this horror before in his young life. I wanted to shout out and tell him to run, to hide. But before I could do anything to help him, the ancient hunter followed my gaze, spotting the child. I cried out as she sent a ball of poison toward him. The green splashed against his side, and he fell helpless to the ground. Anger took control of my body, and I could feel the dark power inside of me rise up. Control it, I told myself. Use it. I blocked all noise and worry and doubt from my mind and went inward, deep down to the root of my power. There I found a flowing river of untapped essence, something more when all else seemed lost. I dove into the source, feeling only a moment of panic as a strange darkness seeped into my being. The hunters descended on me, their hands reaching out to take their prize. I took a deep breath, then let go. I surrendered to this unknown power, trusting it as part of my own foundation, my core. Just as their hands reached me, my body split into a million pieces, turning into pure white smoke. Chapter 63. I am the thing that ends you. My body was gone. I was air, smoke, wind. I moved in a flash, feeling suddenly strong despite my injuries. I took form again behind the hunters, and it happened so fast. They were all standing there trying to figure out where I had gone. I let this new power stream from my hands, the white smoke thick like a rope. I wound it around the younger hunter's chest, neck, and mouth, squeezing so tight I could feel the breath leaving her shriveled body. The ancient hunter sliced through the flow of my energy, but I quickly recreated it. She moved back, confusion torting her wretched face. "What are you?" she screeched. Fear shone in her eyes. "I am the thing that ends you," I said. I reached deep into the ground with my mind, the tendrils of white smoke disappearing down in the earth surrounding the ancient witch. I bent my knees and pulled up with great force, pulling the ground upward in large slabs of rock and dirt. I created a stone prison around the hunter that muffled her terrified screeches. I held the structure up for a moment. Then, with all of my strength, I slammed it down on top of her, crushing her body into nothingness. The remaining witch lay on the ground, gasping for air. She trembled in fear. As I turned my eyes toward her, I lifted my hands to end her, but realized all fight had left her. She was defeated already. Killing her out of hatred didn't seem right. She was no longer any threat to me. That's when I noticed something gleaming on her finger. I looked closer, my hope rising as I recognized the ring. I held my hand out to her. "Give me the ring," I said. She looked down at the ring on her finger, as if just now remembering she had it on. "I can't," she said. "The order will destroy me." "I'll destroy you," I said. "Give it to me." Shaking, she removed the ring and placed it in my hand. I closed my fist around it, tears of joy stinging my eyes. The hunter seized the moment and fled off into the distance. I didn't bother following her. Instead, I slipped the ring on my finger and rushed over to where the little boy had dropped in the field. He lay still, but his eyes were open and he was breathing. Carefully, I picked him up and carried him over the hill to where I'd last seen Jackson. His domed prison was gone, no doubt destroyed when I'd killed the hunter who created it. I set the boy down near him, then touched his face with my hand. Jackson opened his eyes, blinking against the sun that now shined down on us. "Are we alive?" he asked. His question brought a smile to my face. Hadn't I asked nearly the same question just a few months ago when he brought me to this world? "Yes," I said, "we're alive." "How?" he asked, his voice cracking. I still didn't understand it myself. Somehow I had tapped into some unknown power, but where had it come from? Had I connected to Erden's power somehow? I couldn't figure it out. All I knew was that I had survived. Jackson struggled to sit up. Then, as his eyes looked around, a new panic seized him. My stomach turned. I followed his gaze, expecting to see a new group of hunters waiting for us. Instead, the entire hill above us was lined with uniformed soldiers. They stared down at us with no expression. The glint of silver at the waist betrayed their weapons, and I had a feeling their magical skills were nothing to laugh at. I was almost numb to the sight. There had to be at least 24 of them. I wasn't sure I had the strength left to face them all. But I promised I would never give up. I struggled to my feet and lifted my palms, ready to fight. To my surprise, a tall demon stepped forward with the small army. His laughter boomed throughout the quarry. Confused, I stared at him, not dropping my stance. He walked down the side of the hill toward me, a crooked smile on his face. He shook his head. "It's uncanny," he said. "You're just like your father." Chapter 64, Welcome Home. I struggled to stay on my feet. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "My name is Gregory," he said. He held his hand out to me, but I was so disoriented and confused I didn't know whether to trust him or fight him. "What are you doing here?" I asked, looking up at the soldiers. My men and I patrol the lands on the outskirts of the center, he said. We'd been tracking this group of hunters when they suddenly disappeared. It took us a while to find them again, and believe me, we were shocked to see that they'd been taken care of. Gregory leaned down to examine the block of ice and rocks that still encased the third hunter. Do you think she's dead? I asked. I doubt it, he said. These things are extremely difficult to kill, especially when it's 3 against 2. You're lucky to be alive. We know, Jackson said. Too bad you guys didn't come along a little sooner. We only caught the tail end of the fight, Gregory said, looking at me with one raised eyebrow. I ducked my head, wondering if he'd seen what happened to me. I still didn't understand it myself. What did you mean about my father? I asked. How could you possibly know who my father is? Gregory smiled. Your father is a dear friend of mine, he said. I can take you to him if you'd like to meet him. I know he'll be very happy to see you. For the second time in 10 minutes, I felt the breath knocked from my chest. How could this be? My father was here, in the shadow world? What was he doing here? Had he been here my whole life? Does he know I'm here? I asked, not sure what else to say. I sent a runner back to the center, he said. I imagine by now everyone knows you're here. Word spreads fast in the city. Jackson took my hand. Do you think he could be telling the truth? He whispered in my ear. Could your father really be here? I don't know, I said. My mind was spinning. I turned back to Gregory. How do we know we won't be in any danger in your city? He smiled and laughed, shaking his head. I promise, Harper. My mouth opened in surprise. How do you know my name? A lot of demons in this area know your name, he said. You're kind of famous around here, actually. None of this made sense. I wondered just how hard I had hit my head back there. I promise, once you get to the city, your wounds will be looked after, he said, as will the wounds of your small friend here. He needs immediate medical attention. You'll be completely free to come and go, and I can assure you, you'll be much safer there than you will be out here alone, especially now that the hunters can track your magic to this spot. Jackson nodded. I think we should go, he said. I had no idea if this soldier really knew who my father was, but after wondering about my father my whole life, I had to know one way or the other, and I needed to get this boy to safety. Okay, I said, we'll come with you. How far is it to the center? We can get there almost instantly, Gregory said. Just take my hand. I hesitated. Jackson picked up the child, took one of my hands, and nodded. I reached out and grabbed Gregory's hand. The feeling of falling and rushing forward at the same time took over. We shifted into smoke and flew through the air at amazing speeds. Before I had even gotten used to the feeling of being light and fast, we came to a halt just outside an arched gate made of pure silver. It took a moment for me to get my breath, but once I did, I gasped at the beauty of this place. We stood on the outskirts of a gigantic domed city. I took a step back, trying to take it all in. I turned and saw that behind us was the same beautiful scenery we'd been walking through for 2 days. The domed city seemed out of place here. A soldier stepped forward and took the boy from Jackson's arms. We'll get him to our shamans right away, the soldier said. You'll find us when he's better? I asked. The soldier nodded, then disappeared inside the dome. What is this place? Jackson asked. This is the one remaining city in the Southern Kingdom, Gregory explained. Years ago, the king of the South started an initiative to move all citizens into one central location where everyone could be guarded and safe. Over time, the entire country moved into the safety of what we call the center. And the dome? I asked, what's that for? The dome is a special kind of barrier that keeps anyone inside from casting human magic. he said. Pure demon magic still works, but human magic simply doesn't work. If a hunter were to enter through this archway, they would be completely powerless. Amazing, Jackson said. I was actually grateful for the conversation. The thought of possibly meeting my father after all these years scared me to death. It had already been one of the most emotional weeks of my entire life. How much more could my heart take at this point? We'd better get inside, Gregory said. He motioned for us to go ahead. Jackson and I passed through the archway and into the streets of the center. The city sat on a long hillside with a large, ornate castle at the very top of the hill. Gregory led us up through the main path, and as we walked, a crowd began to gather on both sides of the street. Everyone stared at me, whispering. Had word about my battle with the hunters spread this far already? What's going on here? I whispered to Jackson. I'm not sure, he said. But Harper, there are both humans and demons living here. I know everyone looks the same to you, but it's amazing. I've never seen this kind of community before. The Southern Kingdom is nothing like we thought. We continued up the hill, the streets becoming more and more crowded. Several people bowed their heads down low as I passed. Confused, I nodded to them, unsure exactly what was going on. How much further? I asked. Gregory looked up toward the castle. Not much further now, he said. In minutes, we had reached the steps of the castle. With shaky legs, I walked to the top. Gregory led us through an enormous entryway, then straight up a beautiful crystal staircase to the second floor. We followed him down a long corridor, my heart beating so fast in my chest. As we approached a set of tall double doors, servants on either side opened them to reveal a large open room. With tentative steps, I walked inside, my eyes fixing on the golden throne at the far end. I turned back to question Gregory, but he had bowed down, his knees touching the ground. Confused, I glanced back to the throne room. Then I saw him, there, standing in a strip of sunlight, his back turned, was the King of the South. I took a step toward him, feeling strangely drawn in his direction. When he heard my footsteps, he turned slowly, his silver eyes lighting from within. I gasped. I recognized this man from my dream, from the vision I had when I touched the shaman. His cheerful face broke out in a wide smile, and he opened his arms to me. Welcome home, daughter. Chapter 65, Only the Beginning. I stood frozen in the moment. I stared at his familiar yet foreign face and instantly knew he was telling the truth. I didn't know how or when, but I knew in that instant that this demon, this king, was my father. He moved toward me, tears shimmering in his eyes despite his smile. My feet broke free of the floor's hold on them, and I ran forward to meet him, letting his arms wrap around me. Oh, Harper, he said, his tears falling like diamonds into my hair. You have no idea how long I have longed for this moment. Let me look at you. He held me at arm's length and studied my face. He picked up one of my curls, and his smile grew sad. You look so much like your mother. I have so many questions, I said, not knowing where to begin. It was as if a whole new life had just opened up to me. I thought of the strange white smoke. Am I a demon? The king laughed. Half, he said. Actually, a little more than half, but we'll get to that in time, I promise. Jackson joined us, and I reached out to take his hand. And this must be Jackson, the king said. He extended a hand, and the two shook. It's an honor to meet you, sir, he said, putting his arm around me. It sounds like you know a lot more about us than we know about you. I think we have a lot to talk about. Yes, the king said, wiping the tears from his bearded face. There will be plenty of time for your questions. But come, Harper, the people of the kingdom have waited so long to meet you. I'm sure they've all heard of your victory today, too. Your inner strength never ceases to amaze me. I have never felt so proud in my life. Hot tears filled my eyes. My father was proud of me. Those were words I never thought I'd hear in all my life. In all my years, I had never met a single soul who belonged to me. I had never known anyone who could truly be called family until now. At his urging, I stepped out onto the larger stone balcony. Cheers rang out as the crowds below came into view. Fireworks soared into the air and burst in various colors. I stared out, not believing this could be real. Someone down below shouted out, "Welcome home, Princess Harper." I gasped, my hand flying to my chest. Princess? Me? Now I knew I must be dreaming. Can this be real? I asked. Jackson took my hand and gave it a hard squeeze. On my other side, my father put his arm around me, then thrust his other fist high into the air. A roaring cheer went up from the people below, filling my ears with sounds of joyful celebration. It's real, my father said, hugging me tight. And I promise you, it's only the beginning. I'm sorry we went over time, but hopefully some of you were able to stay. It looks like a good group. I wasn't able to look and see, like, is anybody still here? Harper. So a little bit of a story twist there. I will say a little bit. Lots of fun things happening in that section of reading, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I was kind of trying to see any of the comments. Alexandra says, so Jackson will still have a princess, right? Oh, yes. And yes, there are certain things that now are going to start making sense, and they will even more so in the next part, of course, as well. And it's kind of interesting with so many of these things. It's kind of hard to say like when the moment of realization came in, except that when I started thinking, I definitely did not know that Harper. La 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 la. That one? Want that one? This one?
That's kitty.
Yeah. Do you want that? You want this?
That one necklace.
I don't know what she wants. You want to say hi to everybody? You want to sit on Mommy's lap?
Okay. What's this one?
Is that a bunny? So I knew when I started thinking about Harper's father, because I thought, well, he has to play a part in this, and there's still so much more to come in this next book. And I'm like, okay, I got to think of what we know so far and not spoil any of the other stuff. She immediately got down, George. She's been doing this lately. She gets in my lap because she knows I'll put her down, and then she gets into all my stuff, which is a mess right now because we're packing. But yeah, there are definitely some things that happen here, but I did not know in the beginning that she would be part demon. And so this is another one of those situations, just like the very first book, when I got to the end of writing that rough draft and realized who the real killer was in Beautiful Demons. That's when I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I have to go back and kind of rewrite part of the book. Evie, you want to come see Daddy? So there was that. Then this was a similar type of situation. George and I had been talking a lot about like, why is Harper so important to the order? What is really happening with her? Does she actually have more power than just your average girl? How come she doesn't belong? What's really the story with her mother and keeping it hidden, and this guy who had been living in town supposedly with another family, like all of these things that you learn from that journal of her mother's that she found. And I started really thinking about her father, and I was not expecting this at all. But so you'll start to see in the next book how all of this kind of comes together in ways that I don't really want to tell you yet until you read it next time. So it is really cool to open yourself up, because, this is a question that I get asked a lot is, do you have to have the whole series plotted out ahead of time? And I think that sometimes it's important to kind of know large or broad strokes. But for me, I have to leave room for the magic, because if I didn't, then moments like this wouldn't exist. And then this, of course, about Harper changes the whole series. Like, I couldn't, if I didn't plan this and then it came out in the writing, I would have two choices. I could either not have it go this way, which I've heard some writers say that they'll get ideas for twists and then they'll be like, well, that doesn't fit what happens with the rest of the story, so I'm not going to use that twist. But I like using that, and every writer kind of has to make their own choices. But when the twists come, I like to follow them because I think that makes the story interesting. That if it's surprise to me, then it's a surprise to you guys too. And I really like that. Now, there are things too that come out in that style of writing that you do have to understand that as you grow and as your characters grow, there will be things that come out that look like inconsistency. So one of them, for example, is this guy that they're standing there with that says, oh, there's only one gemstone deposit per one, but that's not actually true. And we will find that out later. But you have to understand, like, everybody in each story only knows what they know. Same thing with this journal that Harper was reading. With any person that they talk to, is like, they've all been lied to, right? If you asked anybody about the truth of the Southern Kingdom, they wouldn't say, oh, there's a great king there that lives in this domed city, because it's not true. So you'll start to understand, and it becomes even more important as the series goes on, of just how much people's knowledge has been manipulated. So lots of interesting things. We are going to give away a copy of Beautiful Demons before we go too. So if you've not left a comment and you want, I'm just going to choose from the comments that are most recent. So if you want to just leave a thumbs up or a smile or a heart or something right now, I know we've gone quite a bit over, so I'm going to choose somebody in the next minute. So I'll give you a second to leave a comment. But I think that for me, I like to follow those twists. And I know that this twist for me, in terms of Harper's identity, true identity, didn't start coming up to me until this particular book when I started. So I didn't even know in Shadow Demons that they were going to come into the shadow world. And I certainly didn't know when they were here that they were going to meet her father, or that he would be a demon, much less a king. So I think that stuff is all kind of cool to do. So yeah, that was all kind of new stuff for me. So I'm glad that you guys weren't expecting it. And I, you know, a couple of you are like, I'm crying. And it's like, I started to have a little bit of tears for myself, like in a couple of those moments. And I was like, why am I crying? I wrote this, like, I don't know, 11 years ago. So this book came out in 2012, 2012, right before I had Andrew. So, you know, this book's 9 years old. But it still gets me in the feels. Okay. So if I choose your name and you already have won something, just let me know and I could send you something else. But if you already have this paperback. So Jenna, if you already have this paperback, you can choose a different one. Just let me know. But otherwise I will send you this paperback. Also, we'll be giving one away for Beautiful Demons on the replay on Friday. So Jenna, just email me. You can email me, either email Sarah at Sarah Cannon or Sarah at heartbreathings.com. So thank you guys for sticking around for an extra 20 minutes. We have to go get dinner ready, but thank you. Nicholas says, I remember reading this in 2012 and waiting for book 6. Yeah, so I've talked about this before, that this book came out in January, and then I had Andrew in June, and it took me a while to get back into the stream of like the regularity of writing again. And so that final book, Demons Forever, did not come out until December. And it was a big, long wait for everybody after that. And I know a lot of people waited a long time, they felt like, for that. But now I've made you guys wait even longer for other things. But I have a feeling that the final book in the series is going to come a lot faster, because it's already starting to come together in pieces for me. So thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And it's so hard for me as a writer, because like all these things stick. Like I can tell double words and things like that. I want to go back and re-edit it, but hopefully the magic still is there and that you guys are still enjoying them. And we will start back with Demons Forever, which starts at that exact moment with them looking out on the crowd. That is the exact moment that Demons Forever begins. And we will start that on Monday. But of course, we have our coffee chat on Friday. So I will see you guys then as well. All right. Thank you guys so much. I will try not to have such long readings for Demons Forever, but I will let you guys know the schedule for that when we hit Friday. All right. Thank you guys. Bye.